Well, welcome to, you've already started 2012, but welcome to tonight's talk about the weird and wonderful, wacky world of 2012 and all the strange theories that have been put forward to explain what will or what might not happen. I've divided this into three areas tonight: the hysterical, and I try to get words that rhyme, and they all have the same ending. Metaphysical, and the last one, sorry to have my back to you, Shirley.
Okay.
The practical.
Oh, thanks.
Okay. So I always try and find something that has alliteration, and that sort of sums up each little segment, because I'm very obsessive compulsive and I love order to the point where I can spend a whole month umming and ahhing which word will I use in the talk and which source and things like that. So I have gone through my own labour pains and delivered this baby before you tonight. So, why hysterical? Well, has anyone looked at any of the different articles or websites claiming all sorts of scary things for 2012? Is that what seems to predominate in your mind, that it's going to be, do the sign of the cross and get ready to meet God, or bury yourself in the ground in a bunker, or get a bulletproof vest, or learn how to swim through lava, and things like that? It's a pretty scary scenario, and in fact, I have a friend that used to send me emails, and you get a lot of these people, they find, this is on YouTube, this is on some alternative website that we know something that's been released by an insider, and then they say, this is going to happen and that's going to happen, and what the evidence is. And after a while I had to stop. I had to divert her messages into trash rather than hit spam, because then she'd know that it was blocked and be offended. So I said, I'll just divert it to trash, and if I'm really bored, I'll open up some of these things as, oh no, I don't want to know about the New World Order, I don't want to know about this or that. It's too much. Because if you're a sensitive person like myself, you can start to dwell on it, and that's not where you want your energy to go. It's possible that some scary things, confronting things could happen. That's the world that we live in. But to focus on that and be fearful, that's not the place of power, and that's not where our origin comes from. It's sort of like we've come from light, and we're meant to be powerful and radiating, and no matter what we have to face, if there was a comet coming, well, maybe that's the best time to actually make friends with your neighbour, connect with the people you love, do what you want to do, have your last heroin hit or whatever you wanted to do that you haven't got on your list, and then, get absorbed into the light or start a new cycle on another planet. But that's not the end of it. Well, I found, there's plenty of these strange things, but I'll deal with some of them. Bees. Has anyone heard about the bees theory?
No.
Einstein said that if the bees start to disappear, within about 4 years, the world's agriculture or food supplies could be in danger, and obviously that can lead to things like war, famine, political chaos, things like that. Now, what they have noticed is, especially in the US and Europe, some especially honeybees, have been disappearing. It's like they've gone off to die somewhere, but they can't find the bodies, or when they do find them, they seem to be attacked by some sort of a fungus or a virus or a bacterium, or possibly a toxin that's been used in agriculture. So the idea is, because we rely heavily on bees to pollinate, apart from the wind carrying seeds and apart from animals swallowing seeds and then going to the toilet, and that helps to provide soil for the new life. there's a concern that if the bees start disappearing, we're in deep trouble. So with all these ideas, we haven't really got time to go into the for and against, because that they're talks in their own right. So the unusual behaviour of bees in the US and Europe could harm, especially our first world agriculture. That's us, the Western folks, and that could lead to disorder, war, and famine. It sounds like everyday life anyway, so we don't need the bees to disappear for people to do that. The next one is the Bible Code. That's been around for, I think, about 10 years. Has anyone heard?
It says about Armageddon. Is that what you mean?
Possibly, yeah, and all sorts of things like the assassination of the Israeli Prime Minister, Rabin, and other people. Have you heard of this one,
The Four Trumpets?
The Bible Code?
Yeah, talking about different things, even the Antichrist, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And you sure?
21st December, about it.
Yeah, well, they say that in the Hebrew alphabet, which has different numbers, they find when they count through so many, like they might start with, well, I can't draw Hebrew letters for anything, but imagine that's a Hebrew letter, and then you count so many spaces, a certain number, I think, then you go to the next one, then another one, the next one. Those letters are supposed to spell out words, and people have found all sorts of things like assassinations of certain people or other events. The case against that is the problem with the Hebrew language is they don't, and the same with some other language, they don't use vowels. So when you get 3 or 4 Hebrew letters in a row, the vowels are not included. So whereas we can, like the word, the name for God, Jahv, Yahweh, they leave you don't know if it's an A or an O, or it could be anything, but obviously they would, I think they would put little signs to indicate how to pronounce it, because pronouncing the words the right way was meant to be magical, powerful, and sacred. And in some cases you weren't allowed to write certain divine names out in full, because that was sort of like, bad boy, you can't do that, it's holy, you can't even, I think they have to actually read some things out and other things they don't read out.
Right.
So it's considered a sacred thing. So when you leave vowel sounds out, you can imagine you get one letter, another letter, but without vowels in between. So it's similar to like the there's a word in the New Testament where it talks about it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. There's debate whether the word should have been a very similar word for rope, which makes more sense. It's hard for a rope, which is a really thick piece, to go through the eye of a needle. But because the scribe might have put a similar, say, Greek word by mistake, it came across as a camel, which, yeah, well, I don't think you can fit many camels through a needle anyways, but it still makes sense. But because the vowels are missing, you could end up with all sorts of things. And some people actually put the Bible code through a computer, and they've tried their own thing, and they've found all sorts of strange things that have never happened. So if you look hard enough, you will find some sort of association.
With the Bible Armageddon,
Yeah.
it talks about the trumpets and the angels.
Oh, you're
blowing
talking about the Book of Revelation?
Book of Revelation,
Yeah.
But that sounds pretty scary, that stuff, the way they say that.
In my next talk, I'll actually be explaining some theories about where the Book of Revelation came from. It's actually not a Christian book. It's from Egypt and other sources. And there's a whole big... They claim there's a big cover-up about where it came from. And at one stage, the Book of Revelation was not counted as part of the Scriptures.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so they said, oh, we don't want it in. Another time they voted in, and then they get rid of it, and then eventually they kept it in. But there's a big controversy about what it actually is and where it came from and why it was left in the current collection. The Egyptians. Now they're the most fascinating people I think you could ever think of. Whenever we think of excitement and adventure and the mythical past, we always think, how smart were these people? Were they in contact with aliens? Did they have inventions that we don't know about that are lost? What's the connection with the Egyptians? Well, the only connection is something called the calendar of stone. It sounds like something like one of those Indiana Jones things. The calendar of stone. The calendar of stone is, I think it's an inscription on a piece of stone in the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it uses what they call a phoenix cycle. And you know, the phoenix is that mythical bird that died in flames and then came back to life, sort of like death, resurrection type of thing. So in the calendar of stone, the connection is to the orbit of the galaxy, how our solar system's gone around the galaxy, and how that all finishes up in 2012, completing one great cycle. And that great cycle lasts, the galactic orbit is about 25,625 years. So it's one very big circuit. But that's about all it says, is that they measured galactic orbit completing a circuit or a revolution at the 2012. Not that they would have said the year 2012, because they didn't know about our kind of calendar. But sort of like a very common thing. Well, when this big cycle finishes, it's the end of the cycle. It just happens to be in our time. The galactic alignment. You talk about going to get your car to have an alignment so the steering straight. Well, even the galaxy has an alignment where everything lines up. This means that the planets and stars are used to mark transition points between world ages. So you might get one world age, and then another one, and then another one. Oh God, that's terrible. I did art, but I never went all the way. So you've got different world ages, and the theory goes that some peoples, well, there's claims that the Hopi Indians and the Mayans believe that when you cross from one age to the next, there's a bit of a bump, like a bit of disruption, whether it's the planet or whether there's people dying of the disease or whether there's revolution or who knows what, but there's always some sort of a turbulence. It doesn't necessarily, well, obviously it can't mean total destruction of the world, or else we wouldn't have been here for, if those world ages finished, we'd be on a brand new Earth. But anyway, that's sort of the idea. Now we've got a rare alignment which happens once every 25,600 odd years, where three heavenly features end up in a line. We've got the sun, we've got the earth during winter solstice, and then you've got, imagine the Milky Way, the galaxy, which is pretty big, and it's got a line going, like the equator of the earth. So the sun and the earth will be in alignment on the midline. If you're looking at the galaxy side on, sort of like when you look at a fortune cookie and it's got that little dividing line where the two halves are, looking at it side on, the centre line of that, which is sort of like a flat plane, and then you've got the sun and the earth on that midline, and that only happens once every 25,000 odd years. That's a rare alignment, and so people think, oh right, does that mean the end of the cycle, the end of the world? Now, sort of connected to this one, you've got the Mayan calendar, A lot of the photos they show of the Mayan calendar, you might see these people with tongues sticking out on them. They look really fierce. Usually they've got the Aztec sunstone rather than the Mayans. So they confuse the Aztecs and the Mayans sometimes because they don't know much about it. So sometimes you'll see they've got the wrong picture. It's sort of like putting a Japanese statue and talking about China. So with the Mayan calendar, there's this idea that between December 21 to 23 in the year 2012, there would be some great sort of disaster. Now this became popular back in 1966 with someone who wrote a book called The Maya. So someone, well, I don't know whether they were a scholar or a journalist or whatever, but back in the late 60s someone wrote this book called The Maya, and in this book they referred to things such as Armageddon, in inverted commas, and the suggestion, in inverted commas, of the universe being destroyed or, you know, terrible things happening. So, in other words, it's sort of like an apocalyptic sort of scenario. But that was this particular person's point of view, and of course, back then, not many people in the West knew about the Mayans. So you get someone that starts writing about this ancient culture and connecting it to Western ideas of the end of the world and all this, and people start saying, oh, so is that what they're on about? Okay, so that's what their story is.
Is there going to be a lot of like news and things on TV leading up to December 2012, do you think? News? Yeah, or stories and that?
Probably more on the Discovery Channel, I'd say, because there's been quite a few interesting programs. There's been, if it's not Discovery Channel, it's similar programs talking about like the Great Alignment, Nostradamus, and things like that. The next one, now we do get onto Nostradamus, which is Latin for Our Lady. Nostradamus, Our Lady. So, but I don't think he was really a Catholic. I think he had to play along so he wouldn't get his head chopped off. He warned of a very dark future for the Earth, related to mention of comets. Not a very happy picture. The sun would boil the fish in the ocean, so it's got to be pretty hot if the sun boils the fish. So I guess if you like your fish boiled, you just got to wait and just reach in with thermal gloves and say, that was really good, fresh boiled fish. That might be a good time for changing your diet. And gravity would start to misbehave itself or act in an unnatural way, but I'm not sure whether that means we'll all start to lose weight. So anyone that's got a weight problem, just wait for that. And, gee, my weight's gone down. Sure, just in the last few seconds, that's pretty good. So it could be for people with weight problems, it won't be such a problem. But apparently there were some things that he predicted for the year 2000 or 1999, and those things haven't happened.
He mentioned something about a great big fire coming up. A big great ball of fire will come up, and
did he talk about certain cities being destroyed by fire, or a comet that was on fire, or? He
just said about a big flame of fire.
Yeah. I mean, people could interpret that as a nuclear bomb. That's the trouble. He wrote those little verses that he wrote. There were, I think, 100 of them. They called them quatrains. And he didn't want them to be in set order so that he could hide what he was actually trying to say, because some of it was very dangerous. Because if you're talking about kings and countries and things like that affect how you stand with the other nations. You've got to hide it in fancy words. The story goes that he had 100 quatrains and just threw them into the air, so they were all jumbled. And here we are trying to put them in some sort of order, and then we're trying to work out from the French of 16th century, I think, Nostradamus, I think he died in 1500 something. So the French of that time is different to the French that we have today. So it's sort of like, almost like working from Shakespeare's English to modern English and saying, we don't use that word, what does that word refer to? And then when you identify the word, what could it be, you know, in the real world? So often these things are put in such vague language, sort of like biblical prophecies, where nearly anything could be a fulfillment of it, and very confusing. The last one, don't go and live near Yellowstone. Volcano. Yellowstone Park in America. They say it's overdue to erupt, and it's a super volcano. It's sort of like when someone has a pimple, it's sort of like having a super pimple. So if the super volcano would erupt in the, I think it's the top left-hand section of the US, it would send up that much ash that they believe it would block the sun, and within a matter of years or months we would have some sort of an ice age. They say that 74,000 years ago we had a volcanic winter which destroyed, I think, most of the animal life, and they think the human population in the world was, I'm not quite sure whether it was 10,000, 100,000, but it was just in thousands. So the human race and the animal life were greatly reduced by this. So you can imagine there are some websites saying it could go any time, and if it does, we are in big trouble. Other people are saying, you know, the authorities that test these things say there's nothing to indicate that anything's going to happen in the immediate future.